this video, we are going to see the new features that have been introduced in PHP 8.2 starting from PHP 8.1. In order for me to be able to execute scripts, these sample scripts over here under two versions of PHP, I have created Docker Compose file. This Docker Compose is defining two services, PHP 81, which will be running PHP 8.1 CLI image under PHP 8.1 volume, and the second service PHP 82, which will be running PHP 8.2 CLI image under PHP 82 volume. Now to start those two services, we have simply to execute Docker Compose app-d, and I will be having two containers for my services PHP 81 and PHP 82. I have split my screen into two. On the left hand, I'm going to get into PHP 81 container, and on the right hand, I'm going to get into a container of PHP 82 service. Let's execute this command over here, docker compose exec PHP 81 bash. Then let's cd to PHP 81 src nf, and let's check the PHP version. It should be PHP 81, which is the case over here. Now let's do the same for PHP 82, docker compose exec PHP 82 bash, and then cd PHP 82 src nf, and then let's check out PHP version. It should be PHP 8.2. We are all set now to check out our new features. The first one will be the sensitive parameter attribute. PHP 8.1 and below had a small security issue, which is dumping the content of sensitive parameters in the stack trace. Let's take an example. Here I have a login function. This login function will be taking a login and a secret password, and then we are going to simply throw an exception. If I call my function login over here in a try catch block with my sensitive parameter, which is my login and my password, and then echo the exception stack trace, I'm going to have my secret dumped in plain text, which is not a big deal in dev mode, but imagine this in production mode. This got fixed in PHP 8.2 with the introduction of sensitive parameter attribute. If you are not familiar with attributes, I encourage you to check out my video. It will be appearing in the suggestion area. I will be also linking it in the description box. Now in PHP 8.2, as we said, if you want a parameter to be marked as sensitive, and therefore it will not appear if dumped in stack trace, it will be redacted by PHP. We simply have to mark it with sensitive parameter attribute. So let's try this code over here. This code is basically the same as my login function, with the exception that I have renamed the function with sensitive parameter login, and I have added this attribute over here. The rest is basically the same. Let's execute this code over here in PHP 8.2. Let's try that out. So here I have my first exception with login, zizojab and secret, which is in plain text. This one is without the sensitive parameter attributes, this part of my code over here. And the second display over here is the sensitive parameter. Notice that I have my function call with the login, because the login is not marked with this attribute over here, so it is kept in plain text, but the second parameter is redacted with this display over here. So instead of having secret, I have object sensitive parameter value, which is very secure compared to the first display over here with my secret in plain text. Now you might be asking how can I get the value of that in dev mode, especially let's say that this attribute is made in some third-party library and I really want to see the content of that. Of course, in production we can't do that, but in development we can use this line over here. You have simply to get this stack trace of the exception, then we are going to display the second argument of my function, and then which will be containing the exception. Then we will get the arguments of the function, which is sensitive parameter login, and finally we are going to get the second argument, which is this argument over here, secret password, then finally get value. Get value over here will be called on this object sensitive parameter value, and we are going to get the value of that sensitive parameter, which we already know over here, which is secret. So let's try one last time our execution of this script over here. We should be seeing secret, yeah. So we have this dump over here, string 6 secret, which corresponds to this line over here. So if you want to see the content of a sensitive parameter object, you have just to use this line. The second change is the introduction of a new ini directive that will allow us to set permissions for our error log file. So if I dump ini get error log mode over here in PHP 8.1, I'm going to get false. So let's try this code, and I have false over here, which means that this ini directive does not exist. Now if I dump this in PHP 8.2, I'm going to have 644, which is the default permission for our error log file, which means that the log file is readable and writable by the current user and is only readable by the rest of the world. That's for the second change. The third change is the introduction of the possibility to fetch union properties in constant expression. Let's say that I have an enumeration. This enumeration will be containing 3 values: draft, published, and archived. Then I'm going to define an attribute named listens to. This attribute takes an array of events as arguments in its constructor. Finally, I'm going to define a class called test class. This class defines the listens to attribute that is defined over here. And for this attribute, we are going to pass an array containing key values. Key being one of these enumeration values over here, and the value will be true or false, which means that our test class will be listening to those statuses over here, and the status that it wants to listen will be marked as true. Now in PHP 8.1, if I switch this in PHP 8.1, I'm going to have a problem with this expression over here. Why? Because we cannot call the value of an enumeration within a constant expression. If I execute this script in PHP 8.1, I'm going to have an error saying constant expression contains invalid operations. Now if I execute this same expression in PHP 8.2, I'm not going to have an error. Why? Because PHP 8.2 has introduced the ability to fetch enum properties in constant expressions. So let me switch back to PHP 8.2 in order for this red line to disappear. The fourth change is the introduction of disjunctive normal form, or in short DNF. DNF types allow us to combine union and intersection types following a strict rule. When combining union and intersection types must be grouped with brackets. Let's see an examples. Let's look at some examples. Here, this expression over here is valid. Why? Because we have A union B union C. In the second line, we have A union B and then union C intersection D. This line is valid because we have our intersection grouped by brackets. The same goes for line 3, and we can check some invalid expressions like this one over here because we have this intersection not within brackets, and also the same goes for this one. Now let's see how this new feature will be saving us from typing a lot of code. Let's take this foo class over here that defines a bar method. This bar is taking an entity as parameter. Here in PHP 8.1 and below, if I want to check the type of my entity to be A and B or null, I'm going to have to write all this code over here. If entity instance of A and entity instance of B, or entity equals null, I'm going to return entity, otherwise I'm going to throw an exception. Now all this code over here can be replaced in PHP 8.2 by this simple expression, which is typing my entity with the union of null, which is a type in PHP 8.2, and the intersection of A and B. So this expression is equivalent to all this check. Let's go to the fifth change. PHP 8.2 have now allowed us to use null, false, and true as types. Let's say that we have a class called user, and then this class will be extended by anonymous user. For this anonymous user, isAdmin is going to be always false. So instead of having boolean here as a return type, and then we are going to return false, let's be more specific and have false as well as a return type, and then return false. So false now is a type. The same goes for true. If I have an admin user that extends the same class user, isAdmin will be returning always true, so true will be a return type instead of boolean. Now we have also null defined as a return type. note that if I define my function to be returning null and then I do not return null, or even I omit the null return statement, I'm going to have a problem in my script. Let's try that out. If I execute this script in PHP 8.2, I'm going to have a problem saying that return value must be of type null, null returned in PHP 8.2. So here I have explicitly to return null, otherwise I'm going to have a problem. Also note that we cannot have a nullable null type because it does not make sense. So this line over here is going to trigger an error in PHP. Let's see what PHP Storm will be saying for us. Null cannot be marked as nullable, and I'm guessing that it's the same message that I'm going to get if I execute this script over here. Null cannot be marked as nullable. So this expression is not valid in PHP. We should mark the return type as null only. The sixth change is concerning read-only classes. We have already seen read-only attributes in PHP 8.1. Feel free to check out the video that we'll be linking in the description box or in the suggestion area about that. The problem with read-only attributes is that each time I add a new attribute, I have to define it as read-only. But the problem is if I have a class that contains a lot of attributes that I want to mark them all with read-only, and then each time I add an attribute, I should mark it as well as read-only, it's gonna be redundant and it will be very hard to maintain it. Now in PHP 8.2 I can simply annotate my class as read-only, and then all the attributes within this class will be read-only as well. Let's say that I have this foo class that I have marked as read-only over here that contains a bar property. I can assign a value to my bar property in the constructor, and from that point over we can no longer modify the bar itself to any value. So this code over here will be throwing an error saying fatal unquote error, cannot modify read-only property. We can try that out in PHP 8.2, and I have this error over here that I have marked as command. Now I'm going to comment out this code over here because it is triggering an error, and check out the second thing that I cannot do with read-only classes, which is create a dynamic property. So in PHP 8.2, if I have a read-only class, I cannot define a dynamic property for this class over here, and I'm going to have this error. Let's verify that this is what we are going to get and execute this script. And we have the error unquote error cannot create dynamic property foo bars. So read-only classes cannot define dynamic property. Change number 7 is constants in traits. In PHP older than PHP 8.2, we cannot define constant in a trait and then refer that constant. So that got fixed in PHP 8.2. Now we can define a constant in a trait and use that trait. Notice that we can refer that constant only through the class itself that is using this trait and not through the trait itself. So this expression over here is valid, is going to return for us 1. Let's try that out. We have 1 as expected, which is the constant that we are defining here. But if we want to call the constant with the trait itself, already PHP Storm is complaining, saying that calling static trait member directory is deprecated, and I'm guessing that I'm going to have a problem, an error in my PHP script execution, saying that cannot access trait constant directly in line 13, which is this line over here. So you cannot access the trait constant with this trait itself. The last change is actually not a change but a deprecation. In PHP 8.2, if we define dynamic properties other than std class, we are going to have a deprecation message saying that usage of dynamic properties is deprecated. Let's try that out. First, let me comment this attribute over here. I will tell you why in seconds. If I execute my script over here, I'm going to have a deprecation message saying creating of dynamic property is deprecated. If I want to have this deprecation message deleted and I want to have my class to have dynamic properties, I just have to add this attribute over here, allow dynamic properties, and I will no longer get the message for this case over here. Let's try that out. And now we don't have an error at all. That's it for this video. I will be asking some questions as usual. I will be waiting for your answers in the comment section. See you in next videos to come.